I'm EAC Commissioner Christy McCormick. Each year, the EAC holds National Clearinghouse Awards, also known as the Clearie Awards, to honor election officials who are doing exemplary and innovative work across the country. This year, the EAC commissioners are interviewing some of the 2020 Clearie winners to highlight these best practices and to get a better understanding of the technology, initiatives, and hard work that won Clearie Awards. Today, I'm pleased to speak with George Stern, who is the Clerk and Recorder for Jefferson County, Colorado. The Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder's Office won a 2020 Clearie for outstanding innovation in elections for their online chat feature for voters. Congratulations to you and your staff for this award, George, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really happy to be with you and happy to chat about it.
That's great. To start, can you give us a brief overview of the online chat you used in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. Chat about the chat.
Chat about the chat.
We set up a chat that was available on our website. So voters, to every voter who has our election materials, they know they can go to votejeffco.com. And when they got there, there was a little icon that said, "Let's chat," that would show up at the bottom of their screen or the bottom of their phone if they were accessing it on mobile. And clicking on that immediately took them to a conversation with one of our staff members. That staff member was sitting behind a computer, could be having a few conversations at once, there to answer their questions. So these were any questions people might have called us about in the past, or even come into one of our vote centers. It was really great to have this option to avoid more in-person visits during COVID, but also to relieve a lot of the demand on our call center. And it proved more efficient on our end, but also more effective, because a lot of the things people are asking for, it's better if we give it to them written. They might want to know, where do I send my voter registration form for? It's easier to have that address right in your chat there. You can get an email transcript of it afterward as well, than it is to have us read it to you over the phone. You read it back to us and have to make sure you've got it correct. So overall, really big success for us last year, and we were excited to be able to offer it to our voters.
And it's not something that's new to other areas, right? We get online chats with credit card companies or travel companies. This is something new for elections, though.
That's exactly right. So we, as you said, a lot of times we go to these private sector companies to get customer service, and they're encouraging us to use their online chats. We first discovered it there and actually incorporated it into the DMV side of our office. And Jeffco clerks run elections and the DMV in Colorado in general. We run elections and the DMV. And so we had started incorporating it on that side of the house, and then moved it over to elections. Hadn't seen anyone else doing it, but wanted to make sure that we were leaning on a technology that now a lot of people come to expect when they need customer service or need questions answered, and give it to our voters when they really needed it during an election.
And it's personalized, right? So they can ask a specific question where they might have to search for an answer. Otherwise, you can answer them directly what they need to know.
That's exactly right. And, even look up their voter record to see when their ballot was mailed, or to make sure their information is correct if necessary.
What challenges did you face in developing and implementing the technology?
So several, of course, in implementing any new technology. But as I mentioned, one of the nice things was we had piloted this in our DMV side of the house. So we had already sort of discovered a few of them before moving it over to elections. The first is, brand new technology to the office, have no idea what demand's going to be. We don't know if people expect this in government or going to use it in government. So didn't know how much to staff it. And we had to sort of play with getting that staffing right so that we didn't have people sitting around doing nothing. We had other things for them to be doing as well, but also didn't have too many people waiting in our lines and not getting their chats answered. They're used to, in the public sector, getting immediate answers when they try and chat someone. We initially had to work with our IT department and the vendor that we were using to make sure that it was secure enough up to our standards. And they had to do some updates to get there to allow us to take personally identifying information. So we mentioned that someone might say, "Hey, here's my birthday, here's my address, can you look me up?" That's information we want to make sure is not getting into the wrong hands through hacks or anything else. And so we had to ensure that it was secure enough so that we could be able to use it for any questions that people might send our way. Those were all ones that we were able to overcome and ultimately have it be a big success.
Did you get any feedback from voters or election staff about the program?
They all loved it. So voters particularly appreciated during COVID, not have to come in to get their questions answered, not have to call, even more so during COVID. People were just used to chats and, being able to, in between Zooms or even while on a work Zoom, get their question answered, not have to pick up the phone. We, as many election offices, suffer from long wait times on certain days around elections. So the chat provided that instant set of feedback. And again, it gave people, if they needed a voter registration form, instead of sending them to a website where they look for it, we just gave them a link and they had that link right there. So they loved it. And our staff loved it because it really reduced demand on call centers, which is stressful, and enabled them to be more efficient. They could do a few chats at one time. They could feel like they were helping multiple voters when they knew demand was high for our services, and that enabled them to feel more productive and also less stressed.
And I saw that it decreased the number of calls to your call center to the point where it's almost, you're not going to be using the call center anymore. Is that correct?
So we are still going to use the call center. We definitely have voters who don't have access to internet or, who need to get a hold of us in another way. But you're absolutely right. It reduced call center demand so much that on election day, our obvious usual busiest day, we had call center folks who we sent home early, who did not need to be there because volume was so low. Or if we had cross-trained them, we switched them over to responding to chat so we could respond to even more there. But it was dramatic in how much it relieved demand on our in-person services and on our call center.
So it really helps your human resources allocation as well.
No question, and was far more efficient for us financially. So not only in the speed of responding to folks, but financially, because we pay the folks who are answering these phones or answering these chats the same amount, but one person can do 3, sometimes 4 chats in the time that they're doing one phone call. So we're tripling or quadrupling our impact and how much we're getting for our dollar when we use the chat.
For medium to large jurisdictions, that can have a huge impact. I mean, I've been out to some of the larger jurisdictions and, they have rooms full of people answering phone calls around election time. So that really can help the bottom line, it sounds like.
Absolutely. We saw that in a big way. And I think, we're a pretty large district at 500,000 voters. If you scale that in even larger, you could see even bigger savings.
So is the online chat something you plan to continue using, and where do you see this going in the future?
Yeah, no question. We will continue it. We'll be using it in every election. We have not traditionally used it in between elections. The demand just isn't there. People can get through to a human on the phone right away or email us and get a response right away. But we'll be using it in every single election. We have continued to expand it to other areas of our office. I mentioned the DMV, where it's now extraordinarily popular for the same reasons over there, but we've expanded it to other areas where we serve marriage license customers and passport customers. We're looking for ways to incorporate it wherever we can because of the efficiency, but also how much our customers or our voters love using it.
It sounds really versatile, actually.
It is, and that's the beauty of it, is how easily it scales. It's so simple to add another agent to it if demand is high, or to switch someone out to doing a different task. They can be answering phone calls while they're doing chat if there aren't too many people on the phones or aren't too many people on the chats, or doing mail while they're waiting for chats to come in. So it gives us flexibility that really enables us to adjust to demand and still stay efficient with our staff.
So what recommendations would you give to jurisdictions smaller or larger than yours if they want to implement something similar?
Yeah, I think one of the best things we did is probably natural to most election administrators, is we did not pilot this in the November 2020 election. There's a lot going on there. Yeah. So we actually rolled this out in our June state primary, far fewer voters, far less demand, and ironed out the kinks there. That's where we made sure we were getting the staffing level right, that we were training people right. It takes some time to figure out how to do multiple chats at once, or how to get people into the queue and make sure you're responding to them accordingly. So start it early. Start it in an election where you're going to be able to have an adequate amount of resources on it to give people the time to train, and work with your IT department early. As I said, our IT department discovered that the initial version that we were going to use might not have been secure enough to our standards for collecting people's personally identifying information. So we worked with them really early, which gave us enough time to go back to the vendor and say, hey, can you make these adjustments? And they said, sure, absolutely. And it made it more secure for for our voters so that they could feel good about it. So start early and start when pressures are lower. But then, we found that after doing that, just 4 months later in our big November election, it worked seamlessly because of it.
And make sure it's secure. That's security in elections is very important.
Sure is.
And how about accessibility? I think it sounds like it would be easier for some, voters with disabilities to use this function as well.
Absolutely. So we saw it dramatically expand accessibility. So folks who couldn't leave their homes, for starters, and there were more of those during COVID, more people like that during COVID because for various reasons they had to stay inside their homes. But we also, it can, because it's a chat on their computer, it can incorporate with the technology they're already using. So people who are blind and have computers that enable them to still use computers and use those services, this chat seamlessly fit into what they were trying to do there.
That's fantastic. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from implementing the call center?
I think
the chat function, not the call center. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that we've got to keep innovating in elections, right? I think elections are obviously very heavily regulated for good reason. There are a lot of laws around it. There are a lot of things we need to make sure that we're doing well, that we're maintaining accessibility, maintaining security. But there are better ways that we can help our voters, and sometimes they exist in the private sector. As we discussed, chat was something that was becoming pretty common outside of the government and elections world, and we just had to lift up our heads and look for that innovation and ultimately deliver a much better experience to our voters as a result of that. So I think our team has learned that not to rely only on elections offices or on other government entities to learn what we can be doing better, but to look more broadly for those innovations. Yeah,
there are other areas we can bring technologies in from other contexts and make them work in elections for sure.
No question.
What's next for Jefferson County?
Oh, I wish I could tell you. We've got a lot of big elections coming up. So there's going to be a lot of new innovations. But look, as I said, we've learned that we're going to keep trying to get better and to bring in new things for our voters. We'll definitely keep using chats. In Colorado, in a heavily mail-based model, we're going to keep putting in more drop boxes to expand access where voters are. We're using data to try and figure out how to put drop boxes in the best possible locations that are lower participation areas or areas where it's harder to get mass transit to a voting site. And then we're always looking to improve our security. So how can we bring in experts from the private sector, innovations from the private sector to make sure keeping our systems secure, that we're both in physical security and in cybersecurity, and that we're training our folks on how to look for potential nefarious actors or risks and flag them for us and then help us solve them so that we can keep our elections accessible as much as they are secure.
Well, congratulations to you and to Jefferson County. There was fierce competition for these Clearies, and we really thought this was a great application, innovative way of doing something different that hadn't been done in elections before. So thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing what Jefferson County does next.
Thank you. And thanks for helping us spread the word about this. We really think it's important to share what we've learned with others, and happy to chat with anyone who wants to implement it, but really appreciate you shining a spotlight on it.
Absolutely. And we thank you for joining us today too.
Thank you.
Thanks.